Right, thank you. This is the July 25th meeting of the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. Potentially our last meeting. We'll get on. Welcome, everybody. First item is the May 9th HIAC minutes. Do those.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Favor? David Nash is here. Lance Crawford.
Here.
David Bartholomew.
Here.
Jamie Benshaw.
Here.
Sylvia Diaz.
Present.
Rick Friedman.
Here.
Well, is not here yet. Claire Hubbard. Marcus Laws.
Present.
Tim McLeay. Les Ordway. Joel Steiner. We have a quorum of 7 members. Our community value for this month is to value the voice of people with lived experience. The COC will invest through coaching, mentoring, and leadership development for people with lived experience who work to end homelessness. People experiencing homelessness will be represented at all decision-making tables where their perspectives and voices will help shape policies and guidelines of the system. Any thoughts on that? Good. I want to take some time during this meeting to express some gratitude. So this is gratitude to Elvia and Jamie, who have been very consistent for a long time, really, but especially over the last year and a half, working on some of the issues. Celeste, what do All right, Celeste is here. Welcome, Celeste. The camera is here. It will pick you up when you're speaking, and it will hold on to the last 2 speakers. Projections, so just to be aware. All right, continuum of care for transition.
Very into the tech in this room. Feels great. Good morning. I know that a lot of you have been very engaged with the work of the Continuum of Care and its new iteration, but just going to share a few updates that have happened since the last HIAC meeting. So COC board activities in May, the COC board appointed a funding committee. This committee is part of the charter and will do similar work to the HIAC funding allocations work group. So you can see the funding committee members there. Brian Methvin is the chair, Andrew from Gibbons Estates, Elvia, of course you know, Lacey, who you know, Debbie from Dogwood Health Trust, Nikki from the city of Asheville, and Jacob, who has spoken at a HIAC meeting in the past. So create sort of connectivity between HIAC work and the Continuum of Care efforts currently. The funding committee will review applications and make recommendations on federal funding allocations. So they are working on ESG funding right now, Emergency Solutions Grant. And then they will also review applications for the Continuum of Care funding and make recommendations to the board. Continuum of Care funding has not yet been announced by the federal government, but we expect it any minute now. So more to come on that. And then this funding committee will also review overall community funding and identify and vet any new opportunities that the COC might pursue. So the intention here is that the scope of this committee is broader than ESG and COC funding and really can support the resources needed for the overall continuum of care. The board also in May established a vetting process for any proposal received for funding for permanent supportive housing at the former Ramada. So, Nikki had been sharing updates with you all that city staff were anticipating a proposal would be received. The proposal was received. City staff asked the COC board to identify a process to vet that proposal and make a recommendation ultimately to city council. So the process that the board established was to hear a presentation directly from the proposer, that the board would then identify any additional due diligence needed, so additional information or questions, and assign that to the funding committee to follow up on, and then the funding committee will report those findings back to the COC board, and the board will vote on a recommendation to city council related to the proposal's funding request. So that was the process established in May, and then I'll get back to that in a minute because they have been implementing that process. In June, the COC board participated in 2 days of training with technical assistants. So Amanda Wander, who had really worked very closely with the governance work group on developing the new charter and new framework, was here in person and did 2 days of training with the new board on the continuing of care framework and board responsibilities for just overall level setting and foundation building in advance of strategic planning. The intention is that she'll come back in the fall for strategic planning with the board, and that will really shape the work of the COC for the next, number of years. Also at that board meeting on June 13th, the board appointed and charged a shelter planning work group. So this is carrying forward the work that Lacey had been leading in the shelter planning team and sharing updates with you all on, which was a carry forward of Hayek's shelter work group from last summer. So appointed a new shelter planning work group and also elected board officers for the COC board. So Melina Arrowwood is the chair, April Burgess Johnson is vice chair, and Christian Chambers is secretary. And then in June, the COC board held a meeting where they heard a presentation on the Ramada project proposal. So in May, they established the vetting process. After that establishment, city staff did receive a proposal for $1.5 million in funding for 3 years of supportive services for a new permanent supportive housing project at the Ramada. That proposer shared a presentation with the board at their June 20th meeting. More on the shelter planning work group. So the scope of that was that scope of membership was that it was open to any COC board member, open to participants in the prior planning effort that was the collaborative between Hayek City and County, and open to all current shelter providers in the COC. So Lacey is chairing that shelter planning work group. Hey, welcome.
I don't know if I saw this.
Come in.
This one?
Lacey's chairing that shelter planning work group, and you can see the folks who are participating in that mix of people who had been part of the prior planning effort and shelter providers in the COC and also the COC board members. Shelter planning work group has been very busy and has worked in June to identify unmet shelter needs, review the planning efforts to date, conducted 2 advisor sessions that were open to all COC members to provide input on what's needed for shelter in our community. And then in July, issued a request for proposal to identify partners able to add shelter capacity. So that RFP was issued June 15th, and proposals are due on June 29th. July 29th. So the work group will then, of course, review those proposals received, confirm partners, and develop that overall plan. And then in August, we'll present those results to the COC board for approval, including a proposal to submit to Buncombe County for ARPA funding considerations. So the work group's product will include the materials that will then advance to Buncombe County for funding consideration as approved by the COC board. We also held a COC membership meeting on June 20th. That was an opportunity for COC members to provide input to the board on what is working well and what opportunities the COC has and what the board should prioritize. Again, partly with a view towards strategic planning that will be coming up in the next couple of months, and also a chance for COC members to provide input to the board on the Ramada proposal that was shared that same meeting immediately prior. Funding processes, as I mentioned, the ESG process is now open. Applications were due July 12th, so the funding committee is reviewing those now, and will make recommendations to the board at their next meeting, and then we will submit based on board approval by the August 26th. COC competition coming soon. It's like the boogeyman, we're just waiting for it to happen. So on the horizon, July 29th, proposals are due to the shelter planning work group. August 15th at 4:30 will be the next COC board meeting. That'll be at the Harris Cherokee Center in the banquet hall. And content for that meeting will include a presentation from the shelter planning work group. Will include funding committee due diligence report on the Armada project proposal, funding committee recommendations on ESG applications, hopefully appointments for a coordinated entry work group and appointments to a nominating and membership committee. I didn't include this in the slides, but there have been open applications for both of those the last couple of weeks. And the interim nominating and membership committee, which includes Lance and Tom, both of whom were on the original nominating membership committee, along with 3 COC board members, are meeting today to review the applications for both of these and work on developing slates to recommend to the board at the August 15th meeting. And then unbelievably, we've already started code purple planning, and we will provide an update to the board at the August 15th meeting on what that plan looks like so far and identify any gaps that will be. Then immediately following that, there will be a 6 p.m. membership meeting in the same location. And then what I anticipate will happen once the nominating and membership committee is fully appointed at the August 15th meeting, we know that we need to hold a second board election to fill the remaining 5 seats. So I anticipate that will come pretty quickly once we have that nominating and membership committee established. You can see on the screen what those 5 seats are. And then also appointments to fill the remaining standing committees. So we also have system performance committees, system planning and implementation, and community relations committees in the charter that have not yet been appointed. Next steps, if you haven't, please join the Continuum of Care, and you can stay up to date on all of those activities that I just talked about on the Continuum of Care through Continuum of Care newsletters if you're a member, and then also on the Continuum of Care webpage, which is on the city site. I'm happy to answer any questions.
What does SME stand for?
Subject matter expert.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Questions? Thanks, Emily. The next item on the agenda is the written report, which I just made the draft. Should we walk through that a little bit? Let's walk through it. So the idea here is, at least in terms of this report, is to focus on our work over the last year, which started with the National Alliance to End Homelessness within each report. Some of this is obvious, but I tried not to make it too long. But here's what it is. The first page is really the goals, the initial goals that NAEH laid out for us, what they suggested to be the top priority. Governance structure was one, encampment resolution policy, building capacity of street outreach, increase crisis response capacity to meet 30%. So that's the shelter project. Again, system improvements to coordinated entry, create a high utilizer targeted initiative, and promote a housing surge. Both of these, they noted in their report, required significant new rapid rehousing investment to be effective. And then implement moving on strategies for long-term support housing residents, meaning people who are receiving rental supports through COC funds at some point, in order for there to be flow in the system, need to transition to another program. Usually it's the Section 8 program by the local housing. So we decided to focus on goals 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 as our initial objectives. There's a little bit of additional information about some of the other ones. New continuum of care structure. This is obviously we're reporting this goal to the entity that is the new continuum of care structure, so we don't need to dwell on that for too long. What I personally would like to highlight, everybody agrees, is that we did make a genuine effort to merge the Homeless Coalition and all other provider networks into the new COC board, so that we didn't have two different groups operating in the same space in the community. Any comments on that one, or need for more? It also been an attached document since the new COC board has received the charter, good orientation on how their work should proceed. Any thoughts on that one? All right, encampment policy, we did this committee, before we move on, I want to personally thank all the members of the government subcommittee and for many, many hours of work that went into that process, research, discussion, knocking, and eventual resolution of a dramatically new structure that's broader in our community and encompasses all the work that's going on. I believe will help staff to really carry out their functions if we don't overload them with miscellaneous committees like this one. Anyway, thank you all for your work on that. It was fantastic. Came to, I would say, 100% successful in terms of implementing a new structure.
I think, it was a necessary thing to accomplish some of these other goals. And I know, this group wasn't able to see through all of the goals that we wanted to take on from the National Life Stand Homelessness, but the fact that we were able to do that and create a much stronger continuum of care, that more resources, more decision makers, I think the other goals, we'll have a better chance at taking those on and succeeding in them. So agreed that a lot of praise goes to this committee and the governance committee for all their work in getting that set up.
I just add that it was a remarkable experience for someone who has not been in this work for long. There was a ton to learn, which led to some head knocking in order to get things done. But at the end of the day, people respected each other and found relatively easy compromise. It was really a rewarding experience, as hard as it was.
I say this, and I said it often. I know why our forefathers wore wigs. It was so that they didn't pull each other's hair out. But we got it done, and yeah, we disagreed a lot, and we all knew that we were fighting for the people of Asheville with everything that we wrote. We know what it meant when we wrote it, so we were, a lot of us, especially Rick and myself, were calling it our baby. We know what we meant by writing that charter. We aim to see it lived out the way we wrote it, but all semantics.
Thanks again. Good job. Encampment policy, this was also a vigorous discussion, and I think in terms of coming up with an actual long-term policy for the city and county law enforcement and first responders to follow and the community to follow. Not quite there yet, but we did develop some key policy guidelines and issues for folks to focus on. And I think everybody agreed that we needed to have first responders in the room for those discussions. So I will say also thank you to the encampment work group for the work that they did, the hours they put in discussing key guidelines. Build street outreach capacity. My wife often tells me I need to speak up.
Fixing egg and cheese.
Okay. The shelter work group also put in a lot of hours, had some vigorous discussion, and came up with some temporary solutions. And I think we're grateful for all the work that went into that, and for the fact that the new COC board has rapidly taken on that initiative and appointed a committee to carry it forward in a time frame that will work potentially for some ARPA funding that the county has. Good job, everybody. In that. So, work group, whatever. Skip outreach. For outreach, we deferred on this goal and CSC. Coordinated entry committee also made some significant, I'm sorry.
Going back to street outreach, because that is such an important component in the encampment, I feel concerned that that was deferred.
So I think at this point, we can say, we could add a sentence here thinking, saying this is a very important goal for the new board to take on as soon as possible. Coordinated entry began the process, which was what the goal was. And, it made some significant improvements in the existing coordinated entry policy, including setting up a framework for a new by name list of people experiencing homelessness and adjusting policies specifically for people experiencing domestic violence and for rapid rehousing, which priorities had gotten somehow a little bit off base in those areas. We were able to bring those back to the line. So thanks very much to that committee at that time. And I know that that's going to be a high priority, already is a high priority. So I'm adding a couple of things in here that were also underway in the background, not really on our agenda, just so that the COC is aware of them. For the high utilizer initiative and the housing surge, NAH indicated that we needed new rapid rehousing funding to really implement those things. And the housing authority, even before this report came out back in 2022, was building out its moving to work program, which is a regulatory flexibility program that sounds like it's about work, but isn't all about work. And one of the initiatives that we did lay the groundwork for is a sponsor-based housing assistance initiative. Right now we have tenant-based units where an individual gets a voucher and they take it to landlords. If the landlord accepts it, they can move in. We also have project-based vouchers in some properties where the voucher is attached to a physical unit in that property. But sponsor-based initiatives would allow the housing authority to partner with an agency in the community to create to award a set of vouchers that agency would then implement